Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. Man, they're popping up already. We've got Matt Tommen, looks like he was first, and then Papa looks like he was second from California, and Glenn Snyder. So, good morning to everybody. There's Zappa. He's always right in there. Well, thank you for joining me this morning. I think we've got a pretty good shop talk lined up for you. Maybe one of the better ones. You just never know, depending on what your interest is, I guess. Give you just a quick few updates, and then we'll move right into everything. There's Gary Boer, good buddy, viewer friend. Appreciate it joining in. Yeah, there's all kinds of people popping up here now. Looks like we've already got 35 on board, and that thing's always delayed, so there could be twice that many already. Well, health status wise, as far as I can tell, I'm doing pretty good. I'm in really good shape for the shape I'm in. I'm actually still losing a little bit of weight, and that's intentional. It's not like it's something that's just happening. I'm very conscious of how much I'm eating, and I'm trying to cut back, and I think I was at a high of around 230, and I'm not presently around 210 last night, so that was pretty good. The Bobcat status is holding its own. I used it for quite a while yesterday and finished up the pond, and I have a pond video status to show you here. So let's just take a look at that right off the top and get that out of the way. Well, that was taken late yesterday afternoon, around 5 o'clock or so, and yeah, it didn't take too long to finish it up and put the pipe in there, and I went back out a couple hours later, and water was already running out of the pipe. So that spring, the pond is spring fed, and the spring, I don't know exactly how to measure it, but I would say it probably runs at maybe 4 gallons a minute or 5 gallons a minute. I'm just guessing on that, but I'll give you some idea. So it takes about a minute to fill up a 5-gallon bucket, so it's running pretty decent. Presently, we've got 88 viewers, and glad to have you all here. Everybody's wishing well and good morning, and so good morning to everybody. Okay, let's see. The next thing on my list was I have some drone footage. Now everything probably looks a little different today and is maybe even acting and sounding a little different, and that is because I found an old setup on this software, one of my earlier setups, and I was having some problems with the setup I was using, getting echoes and different things when I was playing videos, and just lots of issues. Well, anyway, I found one of my old setups. I didn't even know it saved these things. And so I tweaked that this morning, and that's why everything looks and sounds a little different. And when I found that old setup, I found this old drone footage, and I'm just going to go ahead and go through this again. And I also added my picture down in the lower right corner so I could do a little bit of narration with you while we're watching this. You'd think these people are smart enough to make software like this live OBS software would let you pause this. I can't pause it. But basically, we're standing right outside the front of the workshop, and we're looking back. The rental retreat is the building on the far left, and the old original farmhouse is the one sitting further up on the hill. Looking back over there, the houses on the other side of the trees is my son's farm. So my son's farm is really just on the other side, starts just on the other side of my pond right there that you can see in the left. So my son's farm is about 160 acres, I think. My farm is 280 acres. And that's looking down my farm. It goes exactly 1 mile from the front fence to the back fence. If you see the hill there in the, I'm a little slow, but that hill that was to the middle on the left is where I had my tower that I built. Now, I don't know, it's spun back around and it's showing my son's property again. That little building that you can see in the lower left there, that's a spring house, and that fills the pond. So there's a spring filling that pond there also. That is the rental retreat there, the little 2-story building you see. And it's, by the way, that's really fixed up nice. My wife did a really nice job on the inside. It's really beautiful on the inside. Much more elaborate on the inside than it looks like it could be there by looking at the outside. Anyway, this is just some old footage that my grandson, I was teaching my grandson how to fly the drone, and he was doing this. That's why it's, so that hill there in the very middle, that's to the very middle there, the skyline, that's where my tower is at, just to give you an idea. And it's one of the higher points on the farm, and it's just kind of a good lookout place. Now, this footage was taken way before I built the tower. This is actually some older footage, and you can tell it was taken in the wintertime because there's no leaves on the trees. And Michael Berkmeyer just gave me a super chat of $5 there. Thank you so very, very much, Michael. I really, really appreciate it. And that's footage looking kind of almost into the woods of the Mark Twain Forest. That's kind of behind the shop. And, there's the front door of the shop, and that's my grandson there operating the drone. And that's me standing there by the Ranger. And he's bringing it in for a landing. And if you get motion sickness, sorry, but it just is what it is, as I say. So he's landing it there on the ground. He did a good job. So, and by the way, his name is, and I tell you, I can never remember names. I know his name as good as I know mine, and right now it's, I want to say Taylor, but it's Tyler. There you go. It's terrible. I have the worst time with names. I don't care if I've known you my whole life. I can look at you in the face and I can't say your name. It's the dumbest thing. I don't know why that is. And it's the same way with song titles. I can't remember song titles. It's so stupid because I can remember the words to like at least 100 songs and really close to 200 songs. I've got almost 200 songs on my list, and I can remember almost every one of them. Oh, well, it's crazy. Moving on, after that drone footage, the next thing on my list was to talk about my current auction that we have out there. And the auction is there's 8 instruments on it. It's on my website, so if you're not aware of it, be sure to check it out. So you go to www.rosastringworks.com and then click on the auctions tab. There are 8 instruments. They're all relatively, or most of them I should say, are relatively inexpensive instruments. And every one of them is going for a very good deal right now. And I'll tell you what, the sleeper in the whole bunch, in my opinion, is the Oscar Schmidt guitar. Now, granted, it's a plywood guitar, but it sounds really good. For a plywood guitar, I would not be ashamed at all to take it on stage and play it. That's how good it sounds. So the fact that it's selling for only $100, it's a steal deal right now. Just want to let you know that. And I'm just being honest. I will make an additional profit the higher they sell, but I'm only getting a small percentage of the whole thing. I'm just helping the fellow out. So, it's quite honestly the amount of time I've spent on it already, no matter how much I make, it really won't pay for my time. So it's nothing like that. I'm not trying to talk them up so that I can make some more money. Trust me, it's got nothing to do with that. You can believe what you want, but that's the truth. The Gibson Mandolin is selling, reasonably cheap, I think, too. I mean, it could go, $500 or $600 more and would still be well worth it, I think. The fiddle is a good buy right now. The Sigma Mandolin is a pretty darn good buy, too, really. And now the Sigma Mandolin, I'm not going to make any claims about the sound on it. It's a little bit thin right now, but it could be woke up with an antler saddle and a good setup. The Hofner banjo is another sleeper buy. That banjo is pretty dang good banjo. If somebody just put new tuners on it, tuning keys on it, that banjo is pretty dang good, I think. It's not quite like a Gibson banjo, I'll be honest. I mean, it's not as heavy as that, but it's got a lot of weight to it for for what I consider an intermediate level or a beginner banjo. It's made pretty dang well. And if it just had good tuners on it, I'd quit calling it an intermediate level or a beginner banjo if it had nice tuners on it. That Oscar Schmidt guitar, by the way, if it'll help it sell better, I'll call it a laminate instead of plywood. Honestly, it's a nice guitar. It really is. It really is. You couldn't go wrong buying it. Let's see. I think that covers all the preliminary stuff I was going to talk about. I can already see some questions popping up. I'm just going to look here. Alan says he's asked me what the tool of choice is for removing a bridge. Well, my tool of choice would be to have somebody else do it. The resonator guitar build in the near future. Yeah, eventually I'm going to do that. It's just, man, there's so much on my plate. It's just, I like to try to get my plate cleaned off before I start on a big project like that. And I can't get my plate cleaned off. That's the truth of it. All right. Anyway, let's see. Moving right along the main subject, I'll come back to those questions later and answer those questions when we scroll up for questions. And if you notice there, they're putting big question marks in front of their questions, so be sure to do that. And I will scroll up later and start at the top and work down. So the subject for today was, I saw a question in the video yesterday about how to bend sides and form sides. And I thought, well, that's really a pretty good subject for the whole shop talk. I'm going to show you where I started and kind of how I've ended up here. It ended up is a pretty good word because I'm not going to be building very many more. Well, I started building mandolins back in '83. And to bend the sides, and I'll just tell you a quick backstory, I didn't have a lot of tools, and yet I was just obsessed with building my first mandolin. Well, I remember distinctly that I broke 18 pieces of wood to get my first sides bent. And it took me, I think, 2 solid days. I think it might have been more than that, but it was 2 solid days before I got the sides bent and put together. Now, keep in mind, I didn't have any real reference. There was no YouTube. You know, I was doing it in my garage, didn't have a lot of tools, and just flying by the seat of my pants pretty much. So I've come from that to being able to, you know, bend a set of sides start to finish in just about 1 hour. And that includes gluing them all up, forming them to the blocks, everything. So that's a pretty big difference. But I'll show you where I started. This is what I started with, and I think I got this idea from Roger Siminoff out of his book, out of the original book. Now, you know, to be quite honest with you, I've got the new book, but I haven't looked at it that closely, so I haven't really compared the new book with the old book yet, and probably never will because I don't have much interest to do that. And so what's the purpose of this? Well, you put this in your vise. The part that I'm holding would be in a vise where it's held really firmly. You can lay this on your workbench and just leave it laying in here, and you blow a low flame to heat this up, and it gets it pretty darn hot. And then you can take your sides of your mandolin, and you could even do a guitar this way. I've never done a guitar on this. I've only done mandolins on this and other small instruments. But anyway, so you heat this up, and the trick of bending wood this way is, you've got to get your wood wet, of course, and put it on here, and then, if you just try to bend the wood by itself, it'll almost always break. That's how I broke 18 pieces of wood on the first one, because I didn't know about the trick that I'm going to show you here. And the trick I'm going to show you is you take a piece of very thin sheet metal, like out of the side of a can. Find a smooth can and just cut a perimeter around it, and just cut a piece about this wide. Put a couple of handles. On the first several I didn't have any, more than several. The first several dozen I did probably. I never had these handles, but these handles really make it nice. You can pull down on it much better. And so basically you bend your wood like you're shining shoes. So you lay your wood across here, and you put this over the top of the wood, and then you basically just kind of rub it back and forth until you start to get the wood to bend, And you have to start at the end kind of, and work your way to the place you want to be. But anyway, by doing that, it does two things. Number one, when your wood is wet, this helps hold the moisture in there better. And but the most important factor is that it spreads the stress out. When you're pulling down on the two ends of the wood, your stress is right dead center, and it's going to break dead center right there. But when you do this, you're spreading that stress out, and it changes it all together. And honestly, with this, you can bend the wood pretty quickly. Now, on a mandolin, actually on any wood, I typically go to around 70 thousandths on the sides. I think if you hear other people talk, that's a little thin, but honestly, I'm always bending the most difficult types of wood anyway, like Paduke's really hard to bend, and so is, extremely curly maple. So 70 thousandths is about right for those kinds of wood. If you're bending an extremely soft wood, more like mahogany or something, you could probably go a little thicker. But anyway, this is what I started with, and quite honestly, it works pretty well. The only negative is controlling the temperature, because your flame in the length of time and all that, it kind of controls the temperature. And then, of course, when you put that wet wood on here, it drops the temperature, and so it's an up and down temperature all the time, and a little bit hard to control. And I will tell you one other secret is the second you stop hearing it, like the steam hissing, like you can kind of hear it hissing a little bit, and then all of a sudden it stops. Well, within that second that it stops, you need to take it off of there, otherwise you're going to burn your wood. So, especially with this type of method, because this gets a little too hot sometimes. Okay, so that's the first method, like I said, and I pretty much got that from Roger Semenoff out of his first book. By the way, this would be, you know, for bigger sides that you would spread the stress out with this and keep the moisture in also. So like for guitar sides and things. Let's see, what do I want to go to next? I don't have this scripted, obviously, as you can tell. All right, well, I think in the evolution of things, when I started doing guitar sides, I started wanting to bend the sides of a guitar, and I was doing Padauk again. Very hard to bend. So I made this tray. Now this is just made out of typical sheet metal, but as I bent it all up and folded it, as you can see the sides folded there, then I also soldered it. And people always make, you know, especially the European people make fun of how I say solder. Well, I make fun of how you say aluminium. So there you go. Anyway, you know, so anyway, I would set this, and the reason you can, this works well is you can put like on 2 burners of your stove, like where my hands are, you can have 2 burners under this, and, you know, heating this up, and you got it, you know, half full of water or whatever, you put your sides in here and boil them. Now, you will have to put some weight on your sides, otherwise they will float. But so what I did was I made myself some little wire, almost like sawhorses type thing, you know, just some little wire things to keep it off the bottom, and then put the sides in there, and then put some weight on them, and kept them in the middle, and literally boil the wood for like guitars. I made quite a few guitars with this method, and it works really well. So you're boiling the sides, they get really hot. Well, then the next step is to use this deal. Now I'm going to carry this over here. You have to understand I'm working really hard. This thing weighs well over 50 pounds. I would say maybe 75 pounds. It's really heavy. Okay, I've got it balanced on my knee. You can see it's the form of a guitar, and you can make this form in any shape of guitar you want. I mean, it could be classical, it could be a parlor guitar, it could be a dreadnought. This one is a dreadnought, and you can see how it's made there. It's you just basically tighten it down. And now the way to use this, so you go from boiling the wood, and then what you do is you tighten down. You put your wood on here, and this is wide enough to put both sides on at the same time, and you're boiling both sides at the same time. And if you know anything about the guitar sides, one edge is straight, and the other edge is got some contour to it. So I put my 2 straight edges together on top of here, and then like you pull down the low spot first, which would be right here in this waist. So I know you can't really see that very well, but anyway, you would pull down the waist first right here. And so what that does is it pulls the waist in, and then the sides are now kind of pointed out like this. Well, then you start working your way from the waist around both directions, and you just keep drawing those sides in like this. And then you'll have to leave it in this clamp for, you know, I would say at least 24 hours. It would probably be, and maybe longer than that, till it dries out really well. And that works really good, especially on, you know, like mahogany and some of those easier to bend woods. Now on your Padauk, you can still have problems with this method, and it can still break your sides. So the problem with Padauk is that it's got such large pores that it dries out really fast. I mean, like you can barely get it over here and get it clamped down before it's drying already. So, you know, you got to consider that. But this does work really well with some kinds of wood especially. And, you know, it's just made out of MDF, and it's totally solid. It's not hollow. You know, in hindsight, if I made it hollow, it'd be a lot lighter, it'd be a lot easier to get around, but I didn't make it that way. These are actual, in other words, I just cut the profile out a whole bunch of times, glued them together, basically, is what I did. And then, of course, had to smooth it out, you know, to make sure it's nice and smooth. I got this idea for this method and this method, I believe. I believe I got that out of this book, The Steel Strings Guitar. And this is by Donald Brosnack, B-R-O-S-N-A-C, Brosnack. And it was $6.95 at the time. I bet it costs more than that now. It's a pretty good book. It's got some pretty good information in it. I also got, for cutting the rosettes, that deal that you do on the drill press that I told you I don't like at all, the one that scares the tar out of me. It's this one here, where it's spinning on the drill press, the circle cutter. That's where I got this method. But this book's okay. I don't necessarily think it's like the best book in the world, but I did get some decent ideas, and it did help me build quite a few guitars at the beginning. Let's see, moving on. Oh, okay. After you bend your sides like this, and I really should also say after you bend your mandolin sides like this, you need to put them in a form to hold them in shape. Let me go back to the mandolin first. This was my first form I built for holding the mandolin sides in shape. I got this straight out of the Roger Siminoff book, and it's you can take it apart. Well, that's great. Roger was a genius in my mind anyway, for the way he, built and taught and everything, and the things he came up with. I think he was a genius. But in my opinion, you don't really need to take this apart, or at least I haven't found the need. Now, perhaps if you aren't building to such a critical size and shape, and maybe if you're not real particular about everything, you might need to take yours apart. I don't know, but I didn't find the need to take this apart here and here. Now, this was the original one out of his original book, and quite honestly, it's not exactly like an F5. I'm talking, well, let me rephrase that. It's not exactly like a Lloyd Loar F5. So I ended up tracing my uncle's Lloyd Loar and built a new one, and you can see here it doesn't come apart. I did put a heavy frame around it because the frames are handy, because you do need to clamp a lot of times. You're clamping from this block up to here, and it just gives you a little bit more purchase on your clamp, that type of thing, and you don't have to worry about breaking up your particle board and that kind of thing. Do you really need the frame around it? You don't really have to have that, but I just chose to do it. So anyway, it took it straight out of Roger Siminoff's playbook, but I just made this one specifically to fit my uncle's Lloyd Loar F5 mandolin. Then for guitars, you need the same kind of thing. So after you bend your sides and you leave them set in this thing for a couple of days, then you need a place to put them. Now, I've got two of these. The original one I made, well, actually, I got two of these too. The original ones I made, I had orders to build 12-string Martin-style guitars. I had two orders from two different people. So I bought the plans for a Martin 12-string guitar. Now, those shoulders were a little bit more soft in this area here. They're a little more rounded. These are a little more squared off. I mean, a little more square than they are on the 12 string. So this is the actual dreadnought one that I made afterwards. Now, I also cut out all this area in here, as you can see, and that's really helpful because a lot of times you're putting in a brace from here to here, or from here to here, or from here to here, or whatever, or you just want to get in there and inspect it, from the back side for one reason or another. And it's just handy, especially once you're gluing on a top or you're gluing on a back. You can't see from the front because you're putting a back or a top on, and so you can see from the back side, you can inspect the inside there and make sure things are lined up right and everything. So having this cutout was my own idea, and it's really a pretty good idea, I think. Why I have these blocks added on here and here, they're not absolutely necessary, but I found that they are absolutely necessary, if you will. You know, most folks don't have that, but what I did was, since I'm building my sides to a certain height, I put these blocks on that go all the way up to the top, so that the top of this would be unsupported, you understand, and if you bump it, you can crack it right at this line. You can crack your sides. So this keeps the side from pushing out there on the each end. So basically it's the height of the sides on each end. And that's, in my opinion, a real good thing to support. So, and the nails around the edges are so I can take either string or rubber bands and go back and forth and clamp the top down or the back down to the sides. So, and again, I got this was pretty much in that guitar book that I showed you earlier. The plans for this, and well, I shouldn't say plans, it just showed pictures of these things. I just made them to the size and shape of the instrument I was building. So I didn't have any specific plans, if you will. And again, it's just multiple plies of MDF cut out and glued together. I think you can see the plies there. So once again, this is plywood. Okay. I'm trying to think, does that catch me up with where I'm at? Okay, so now my more modern method, or my third, I guess you'd say, method, because see, this is kind of like method number 1. Boiling was method number 2. And now method number 3 is as you've all seen in my videos, method number 3 is this. And this is an electric heat, side bender, and it's controlled by this computer here in the back, and the temperature and everything it's a little different kind of thermostat in that it pretty much always has heat going to this versus on, off. And it's got a brain in there that keeps this at the temperature you want it. So in other words, if you're wetting it down and cooling this off, this thing applies automatically more heat. And, you know, vice versa. If this is getting too hot, well, this automatically cools down. So, you know, this little rig here, for me, is the Cadillac, the cat's meow. It really is. And I just kind of thunked this up on my own, and I got ideas, of course, from other ones I had seen, don't get me wrong, but, I started doing research on these, I can't think of what these are called. That's my problem. Again, a name thing. I can't think of names. But anyway, I do have all of that listed on my website. I have a specific page on how to build this on my website, pointing to several videos. So, that's the name of that tune. I think that's about everything I had planned to cover this morning. I hope I covered it where it made some sense. Since I don't really have a script or anything, I just ad-lib everything. I think I'm ready to just go back to the question board. Let me look at my notes here just to make sure I didn't miss something. I think I've covered everything. Oh, no, I didn't. I always skip something. Every single shop talk, I always go, oh, I forgot to mention it. Because even though I make notes about it, I'm not a good reader, so I skip over stuff. It's really hard. Products I use. You know, I talked to you several times now about products I use, and I built also another page on my website that lists pretty much, well, not all the products, but a great deal of the products I use are listed on that page. We're up to about 40 now that are on that page. And I just, and I do get a slight commission, and you are supporting the channel if you buy them off of that list. And in other words, you click on the link and you go to it. That does help me a little bit. Now, so in case you were suspicious and you were really wondering if I'm telling the truth, I am telling the truth. I don't make much money off of this. In fact, I didn't make enough money on the first month to actually pay. Well, I didn't even make near enough to pay for my time of doing all the work. So what did I make? On the first month, Amazon said I made a commission of $44. So I just thought I'd let you know that that's the truth. I made $44. So that'll just give you some idea, but you still are supporting the channel. I mean, every dollar that comes in helps a little bit, and now the fact that I've done all the work, every dollar that comes in from this point on is more or less profit. So just thought I'd let you know, and I always try to keep it real and keep it honest, 149 viewers right now, so that's good. Let me scroll back up and I'll start looking for the question marks, and we'll start from the top and work down. And again, I apologize if I miss you, because again, I'm a terrible reader and it's really hard for me to find stuff. I'm scrolling here. The first one I see that's got the question marks in the front, you understand, that's what I'm looking for. Mike C says, Jerry, how in the world did you put in the overflow pipe after the pond was full? Good question. I had the same question myself. I thought, how the heck am I going to do that now? Well, where there's a will, there's a way. I bought a single wall of flexible conduit pipe, basically. It was 20 feet long. You could actually bend it around where the ends would actually touch. But it was still strong enough, to support the weight. And what I did was I dug a deep trench down low, as you can see where it was down low. And so I took the backhoe that's an attachment for my Bobcat, which I also had to rebuild, as you recall, or perhaps recall. And there is a video out there about me rebuilding the backhoe to make it work on my new Bobcat. Well, anyway, I reached down. It only reaches like 9 feet, but that bank is not any more than that. So I could reach to the bottom of the bank and then start digging up to the top of the dam. And then I dug across the dam about roughly, 18 inches deep, because it's only an 8-inch pipe. So there's about a foot of dirt over the top of it, roughly. And then right at the very end, right as it comes up to the water level, I just kind of come up right at and by then the dam's coming down the other side to the water side. And so I just kind of snaked it up a little bit and then just came out level with the water, basically. I just dished it out enough. And then I really added a lot more dirt on top of the dam. I probably added at least another 10 inches of dirt on top of the dam after I put the pipe in. So now the pipe's covered by probably 18 to 20 inches of dirt in the shallowest place and very deep on the backside and going down. So that's how I did it. It took a little bit of thinking up here too, because I wasn't sure how I was going to do that either. But anyway, I did it and it worked just fine. Works really good. Alan Dust, questions. What is your tool of choice for removing the bridge on your crowning tool? And I think you used the wide burr. What method did you use to relieve the edges? I'm drawing a blank on the crowning tool. On the fret crowning tool. Whoops. I'll go to that first since I got that here handy. But the fret crowning tool, the large one, I just found this out by accident. After I ground these off, because I was having trouble with the large frets even the way this was designed, even with the large frets, I was having problems with these edges rubbing the fretboard, especially because I like to rock it, a little bit. I honestly don't want to take the top of the fret down. I want to round it off. I don't want to take the top of the fret down because I've already spent time leveling it, and I don't want to change that. And I mean, I can't even stress enough that you don't want to change that. So what I did was I just put this in the handle, and I went over to my sander, a belt sander, and I just laid it on there, and the belts, and as the belt's moving, I just went to the edges like this and rounded those edges off. And I just, I would look at it and I'd put it back on there and I'd round it and I'd look at it and put it back on, a little bit at a time, sneak up on it, as I say, until I rounded it off to where, I got it rounded off to where the threads, the teeth started on the file. And that's all I did. I just rounded it off like that. And that changed everything with this. I mean, like, I don't leave any marks on the fretboard, and I can even use this on medium frets now, and I don't leave any marks. And I find it quicker to round off with the bigger file than with the smaller file. Everybody's got their ideas and their complaints. When I tell people I do this, they say, they make negative comments that you don't know what you're doing, that kind of thing. But I'm telling you, this works. How do I know it works? Because I do it every single day. So I know it works. Okay. Your other question was tool of choice for removing the bridge. Well, I show it in the video all the time, so I guess I'm a little bit confused about that question. You've seen my bridge heater that I made, which is made just like the side bender. It's made exactly like it. It's just that it's on a portable handle instead of on that upright post. And so the plans for making my bridge heater are on my website again. But the tool is this. It's just a palette knife, I think. I bought this so long ago, and I'll be honest with you, I was at again, I can't think of names. I was at one of the box stores that handles art supplies and stuff. I can't think of it right now, but me and names. I can't think of names. It's just impossible. It's like the bane of my existence. I cannot think of names. But anyway, I was in that box store looking around, and I found the palette knives. And I went in. This was recently, a couple weeks ago. And all of those were real flexy and flimsy. And I'm going like, oh, they kind of look like this, but they're not as strong as this one. I bought this one a long time ago. This one's very strong, very stiff. I mean, it is flexible. You can see I can bend it, but it's way hard to bend. It's not easy to bend. I shouldn't say this, knock on wood, I have never bent this tool. Where all of the other ones I have used, I have bent. All of them, every single one of them, I have bent. This one has never bent. Now, the second best tool I have come up with for this, and this thing here, I wouldn't take $100 for this if I had, because this is what I really need, And the other thing is I see people using really wide ones and wide putty knife ones and things like that. And I'm going, that don't work for me because I can't push it with that much force. It takes force to get these off, to break. You're basically breaking the instrument. And, those wide ones, I mean, if you have a really loose bridge, you can take it off with a butter knife. You can do anything with something that's already really loose. But you get one that's stuck and does not want to come off, you try those wide ones and I'll just laugh at you because this thing here will go in there when those wide ones will just, push and stop. And so that's why I like this. And because it's small, you just put it on that heating block and it heats up almost instantly. I mean, I bet if you hold it under that long, it's really hot, and it's already hot enough to burn your finish. So you got to be careful with it when you heat it up, but it works really good. It holds a good edge. It's sharp. I mean, like right now, you could cut yourself with this. It's really sharp. So anyway, that works. My second best tool And I'm not crazy about my holder here. I need to put another rivet in this because this can spin in the handle a little bit because it's only got one rivet. But my second best is I got a pretty darn stiff putty knife and I rounded it off. Now you can see this one is wider, it is bigger. Once I get started with the other one, a lot of times I'll put this one there, a lot of times just to hold the space open. So I'll put this in as a space holder. But I do use this one for pushing too. And I have not bent this one yet either. I said I bent every other one. Well, I take it back. Maybe I did bend this once. I kind of see a kind of a bend there, I think. But anyway, almost every other one I've ever used, I bend. This one's pretty stiff too. You can see it's a pretty stiff putty knife. It's flexible, but stiff is good when it comes to removing bridges. Let me tell you. Flimsy, it just doesn't work at all for me. So that's what I have and where I got them as far as I know. I'm pretty sure I bought that one at a hobby store, a painting, and I'm pretty sure it was a painter's palette knife. But man, it's a lot stiffer than any of the ones I found at the box store I was at the other day. Okay, Alan, I hope that answers your questions. Paul Akers. Is the resonator guitar build in the near future? I kind of mentioned that earlier. Yeah, it's just getting to it. It's seriously, I want to do it so bad. I can't even tell you how bad I want to start on it. I really want to start on it tomorrow. But the reality is I just can't. I got so much on my plate. I got people waiting on instruments, and I just can't get to them all. With all the other issues I have here on the farm, as you can tell, it's more than I can handle. And I'm getting old, you know, and that's the other problem. If I was a lot younger, I'd probably be working a lot longer hours. My hours have cut way down compared to what I used to work. I was working 18-hour days every day. I would say now I'm working an 8-hour day, which still seems like a long day for most people, but it's a lot different. You don't get as much done in an 8-hour day as you do in an 18-hour day. Okay, David Rushing. How do I go about getting one of your rentals? It's all, good question, because that has changed. You can still go to my website, and there is a thing on there about rental retreat, and you go down, and there's 2 different links now, and the links will take you to the Airbnb site. The apartment rental, which is the one that's on the end of the house, but it is a totally separate unit, totally separate interests, all that. You're not coming in my house, and I'm not going in your apartment. There's no access to either one of them from the house. But anyway, so it's a separate unit, but you can click on the link to either the apartment to rent and come here for an instrument, or if you can click on the rental retreat and come here for an instrument also. The rental retreat's much bigger, and both of them are fixed up really nice. The rental retreat would probably be more for a family or multiple people, where the apartment is really a 2-person is about it on the apartment. You probably wouldn't want more than 2 people in there, and even 2, unless you're good friends, would be crowded. Anyway. Let's see. So that's how you get there. You can go to my website as your starting point, but it will take you to Airbnb's website. You can also just go to Airbnb and search on, I think, Valley Springs Ranch, or search on Newburgh and click around and you'll find it. It's just a little more cumbersome process on Airbnb. So it's probably best you start on my website to get there directly. Let's see. Bruce Ducker, I think, is the next question. Just a suggestion, zoom the camera out a bit. Yes, I know that. I tried that all morning, and no, I can't. It's hard to explain, but this software is not like your normal software. It doesn't let you do things. Just like the pause in that, when I was showing you the video of footage of the farm, there's no way to pause it that I can find. It would be so awesome if you could just pause that and talk about it for a second, but you can't. And in zooming this out, I have tried everything I can. I've changed the aspect ratio. I'm no dummy when it comes to computers. Trust me. That's what I did for a living at Southwestern Bell. Was I designed systems, and I also supported break fix on PCs. So you're not talking to a dummy when you're talking about PCs and things. Yet I cannot reliably find a method for zooming in and zooming out with this thing. And this is just one of those typical little webcams, and it's pretty much all run by software. There's no, mechanical things you can change on it to make it work. So there you go. And that's the name of that tune. If somebody knows how to do it in a reliable way, tell me. I have gotten it to happen a time or two, but half the time I can't even figure out how I did it. This is some complicated software if you've never used it. It really is. It does stuff like you can't even imagine the stuff it does. Like you'll change the microphone and your video will change and you go, why did that change? It got nothing to do with it, but yet it'll change. Stuff like that happens all the time on this software. It's crazy. I mean, it's great software on one hand, and on the other hand, it really sucks. Not that I could do any better. Billy Porterfield. Why is it important that the Be Good oil is food safe as opposed to boiled linseed oil? I don't know that it is. I think boiled linseed oil is actually just as good in a lot of ways. And in some ways it's better because when you're using the wax, you're getting wax. And you may not want wax on something. You may just want to put the oil. And that's a good point. So you may just want to use the boiled linseed oil. It says, I never planned on eating either of them. Are there other properties I'm overlooking? Not really, no. I mean, the boiled linseed oil, in my opinion, is excellent. In fact, that's all I ever used up until I found this other, and I do like the other. It's nice, and the food safe has nothing to do with anything except that there's so many, let me repeat that, so many safety Sallys out there in the world that when you say something like that, they'll adopt the idea much quicker. Sorry, but that's the truth. And there you go. So that's if there's an importance to the food safe, there's the importance right there. But I wasn't going to say that until you drew it out of me. Anyway, so yeah, in my opinion, if you want to go cheap, for sure, the boiled linseed oil is the much cheaper alternative, and it lasts forever. I like, just a little, what is that, a quart or half quart little can, pint can, I don't know what it is, but those small rectangular cans, that'll last you the rest of your life. I mean, it just lasts forever. So you don't need much of it. You sure don't need to buy a gallon can, I can tell you that. Even as much as I use it, shoot, I'm seriously telling you, that can, just that small can's lasted me probably 25 years. And I'm not kidding, it may be longer than that. So the boiled linseed oil is very good. And I'll tell you where the boiled linseed oil shines for me. Now, the other would work too. But I prefer to do the boiled linseed oil like when you're trying to restore an old finish, like an old violin that's just pinged and beat up and just looks like somebody drug it down a gravel road, which a lot of them do. A lot of them look that way. If you just take and wipe that, I mean, first of all, you clean it first, maybe with maybe just a lightly damp cloth, or you try to clean it as much as you can. But then you take the boiled linseed oil on one of those blue shop towels right there, and you just wipe it down and just wipe the whole thing, that whole instrument down with that. It'll look like it's 50 years younger. You know what I mean? It just takes the age off the instrument just almost immediately. Then you need to dry it again, but that boiled linseed oil is good for those things like that. So that's where the boiled linseed oil really shines, in my opinion. And the reason is because I don't want to put wax on that, because there could be bare wood parts there, and maybe sometime later you're going to want to finish that, and you don't The boiled linseed oil is not that big of a problem, but the other could be. How many mandolins, Paul Walton says, how many mandolins did you build before you built the Lloyd Loar one? Well, I started building the Lloyd Loar one in the 90s. I don't know for sure, to be truthful. I could look it up, but I'm going to say roughly a dozen or so, maybe a few more than that, but about a dozen I would say would be close. So I built a dozen of them on the form or the shape of Roger Siminoff, and then every one since then has been built on the Lloyd Loar pattern. Can I list the fret wire I use for mandolins? I get it from StewMac, and I just buy their standard medium fret wire. I think they do have some very tiny fret wire, and they do have some larger fret wire. I don't like either of those. I really like the standard medium fret wire, and honestly, I don't know more than that about it right now without looking it up. Well, what the heck? I'll go pull the thing down and tell you the number.
Opal's got a little shop, coffee, tea, and soda pop, written on the faded window sign. Ruby and Pearl are her best friends. There you'll find the three of them, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30. You can set a watch by their routine. Classic small town Norman Rockwell scene.
The number that I found on the tube, I buy it by the tube. I buy a lot of it at a time. And it was 764, and that's off of StewMac's website. That's the one I use for mandolins. I'm not a big fan of what I call fads, where they go to those super large frets. And to be honest with you, up until recently, I've always felt like the radius mandolin neck was a fad. But gee whiz, everybody's must have those now, because I'm selling 2-to-1 of the radius mandolin saddles over the straight mandolin saddles. For years, I almost never sold a radius. Now almost all of them I sell, or the majority of them I sell, are radius. And honestly, I find the radius mandolin very cumbersome. I really do. I can't figure out, honestly, I cannot think of a single benefit that the radius provides. But obviously, I'm old school, and obviously I don't know what I'm talking about, because everybody's using them. So there you go. But anyway, I use the medium fret wire, and you'd have to whip me to use that big stuff. There's people that have had me put the big stuff in their mandolins, and I'll do it. But for me personally, I think that just sucks. I mean, your frets are so, your strings are so high above your fretboard because the fret wire is so huge. It hurts my fingers. I just can't see a benefit. I'm old school, I admit it, I know it, so you can take that with a grain of salt. Okay, that was the fret wire. Now, Ted Martins asked, can I list the strings you use on your mandolins and guitars? Well, the strings, it's pretty black and white for me, and it doesn't really matter the manufacturer. I use the medium mandolin strings most of the time, or medium heavy, and it doesn't matter whether it's GHS or D'Addario, but I want for sure phosphor bronze on all my strings, with the exception that if you have a mandolin you're trying to get it to sound more woody, then I use the GHS silken steel strings, the LS250s. The strings I use are on my website, on my shopping page. I like the J75s myself for the mandolin. The J74s are the standard. That's what almost everybody uses. But I prefer the J75s. They're a little bit heavier, give you a little bit more punch, a little more stay in tune type of thing. They're not that much heavier, but I do like the J75s. So that's pretty much it for bronze. I don't like coated strings necessarily. While I know a lot of people just swear by the coated strings, I think they're fine. I don't have anything really opposed to them. But on my bench here, I can absolutely 100% of the time tell the difference between coated strings and phosphor bronze. Phosphor bronze has a cleaner, punchier sound. The coated strings, to me, always sound slightly muted. Not a huge difference, but very slightly, and I can hear it. Now, where the coated strings would shine is they'll keep that same sound for a very long time. They don't get worse, over time, where the phosphor bronze will get worse. So there's the difference, but, on a mandolin, I actually like it when the strings start to sound a little flatter. You know what I mean? To me, brand new strings on a mandolin is not necessarily my favorite sound. Brand new strings on a guitar is. I really like the sound of brand new strings on a guitar. But on a mandolin, slightly older strings, in my opinion, sound better. Everybody's got an opinion, that you just heard mine. That's all. But that's really it. That's pretty much strings in a nutshell. It doesn't really matter who you buy them from, in my opinion, as long as they're phosphor bronze and as long as they're the proper gauges. So the medium gauge on the mandolin and on the guitar, typically the medium or the light. But again, phosphor bronze, not the stuff like 80-20 and all these different things that you can hear about and Manel and all these other things. There's all kinds of bronzes out there. I want phosphor bronze, period. And it just and the reason is because it lasts the longest for me. Now that's for me. There are people that maybe phosphor bronze would react with their chemistry, and maybe that's not their best choice. You actually do need to search around until you find the chemistry that works the best for you. For instance, nickel is believe it or not, nickel is my second choice in terms of long lasting. In fact, they probably last longer for me personally, than phosphor bronze. But nickel doesn't sound that great on a guitar, and on a mandolin it sounds, believe it or not, pretty good. Really, it's not that bad on a mandolin. And I actually did use nickel strings on my mandolin for many years. But once the phosphor bronze kind of came out, and I kind of switched over and just felt like that was the best way to go. Okay, Paul Walton, and let me just finish that one more time by saying, go to my website on the shopping page, and pretty much those are, for the most part, the strings I typically recommend. Now that's for the mandolin. I don't know if I even have the guitar strings listed on my website. I have to go back and look. But I could, because I mostly sell either the GHS or the Diodario guitar strings. That's what I carry here in the shop. Paul Walton, how did you modify the electric side bender iron to make the smaller radius bends? How is it attached? Well, it's from here down to about the bottom of this. That's just a big long piece of aluminum. Maybe it doesn't go to the bottom. Let me think about it. Yeah, it does. Pretty much goes to the bottom. It's a long piece of aluminum. Now I have a metal lathe. So I just turned this part down to a size. I didn't really care so much. I just turned it down smaller because I needed to be able to bend smaller radiuses. And then this here kind of happened by accident. This is even smaller right here than it is up here, which is kind of dumb, but I don't know how that happened. I can't remember, to be honest with you. Maybe I was going to cut it off and then decided to leave that little tiny spot up there. But anyway, you can use these really tiny spaces for bending trim, like binding and things like that. But this size here, on this part here, it doesn't look like aluminum. That's because I put a stainless steel sleeve around it. Would I do that again? Probably not. I probably didn't need to go to that extreme. It was just ideas I had when I was building it. So I shrunk fit this stainless steel on the aluminum. So it's a tight fit. You couldn't pull it off of here. So in other words, I made the aluminum to about 1/1000th bigger than the stainless steel, or maybe 2/1000ths bigger than the stainless steel. Then I heated the stainless steel up, slid it down over the top of the aluminum, and it shrunk tight around it. Trust me, you can pick up the whole thing by that right there. So it's not going to slide off. And so I can tell you the sizes, but I don't think they're all that terribly relevant because I didn't really care too much what the sizes were. I just trying to find my calipers. I'm telling you, more than anything, these are the calipers. They leap all over the shop, and that's the truth. I never know where they're at. This is the one tool I can't ever find. I don't know why that is, but it's everywhere. Because I use them so much, I guess. But anyway, I'll just give you a measurement here. That's right on 2 inches exactly on the outside of this. And on the outside of this one, it's about 1 3/8 inches here. And then the tiny one at the top is about, I think about 1/2 inch. It's just a little under 1/2 inch. And the tiniest one in the middle here, it's right at 400 thousandths. And then I got to really wanting something a little bit bigger than this, honestly. So I just machined up this little piece of brass here, and I can slide this down over the top of that, and I can bend a more like for a wider side, since, like if I needed a tight bend, like for instance, when I put that third point on that new mandolin that I built for myself, I had to have a really tight radius bend, and I needed it the width of the mandolin, so I just slid this down over the top of that, and now I could bend wider things at a tiny radius. So it's just real versatile. Again, the plans for how I pretty much built this whole thing are on my website, or I should say videos connected to it are on my website. Links. So anyway, that's the name of that tune. Sizes, you can just kind of pick and choose whatever you think will work best for you. If you're building lots of guitars, instead of 2 inches there on the bottom, maybe 3 inches. If you're building lots of guitars, it might even be better. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. Let's see. The next thing. Gordon Bartlett. Food safe means that you can enjoy the buffet without washing your hands after you play. Probably. Let's see. Getting close to the bottom here, it looks like. Phil Gallagher, any truth that boiled linseed oil left rag will spontaneously combust? Yes, Phil, it is true. And, there's a lot of people out there, there's all kinds of myths and stuff, but oily rags together can combust. This hand's on a Bible. Ask me how I know. When I was a kid, my dad was bad about having a lot of greasy shop towels and oily rags, and threw them in a barrel and burned down his whole shop. It spontaneously combusted and burnt up all of his lawn equipment and a bunch of trucks and everything else. And the fire department determined that that's where the fire had started, was on those oily rags. I've also come across situations where spontaneous combustion was in the start, and I was able to put it out. One time it was on some kind of oily rag type thing. I can't remember what it was. I saw it smoking and got, was there in time and fixed it. And another time, several times, it's been in hay. And we had another barn, again, ask me how I know. We had hay burned down a barn one time, and because of that, I have been very, skeptical about hay. And there's been a couple of times where I've found hay that was already smoking. And so trust me, it can happen. I know firsthand it can happen. And I've seen it. I mean, actually, with these two eyes, I've seen it. Where a lot of people talk about it and they just make up crap on the internet all the time. But you're talking to a guy who has actually seen it, and I wouldn't lie to you about it. Now, boiled linseed oil, can I say that I've seen that start a fire? I can't say I've seen it, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it at all. M. Richardson. Jerry, can you say about the guitar back struts why they start wide at the lower bout and are thinner at the upper bout? Well, I think that depends on the instrument and on all kinds of situations. I don't think that's always true. And I'll just give you an example. Like on a guitar, there are some very thin ones in the lower bout. I'm talking about the top now, actually. But on the guitar, there's some very thin ones on the lower bout, and there's some very big ones and thick ones at the upper bout. And it's a strength thing in that case for the strength of the neck and stuff. And on the back, I typically make mine all about the same size, I'll be honest with you. They're all carved about the same. I don't really change mine from one end to the other. So if you've seen that, I would say that someone thinks or has the opinion that it will vibrate better up at the in the lower area because it's shorter, it's smaller, it's more condensed, and therefore they probably wanted it lighter to help with the vibration. And there's probably some truth to that. So that's the best I got for you. I don't really have a black and white on that one. Let's see. Doug says, what happened to the last guitar you built that developed some cracks? It's beautiful. That guitar, well, I took it in and worked on it. They were having their festival, and I worked on it, and quite honestly, I didn't have a lot of time, so I kind of put a quick fix on it and buffed it out, and it was pretty good, but it probably could use some more work here in the shop, but it's holding just fine. I really think that was a case of, I always tell you that you can't really dry your wood out by leaving it set on a shelf or setting it in, like if you leave your guitar in your house, it's not going to really dry out. It's kind of a double-edged sword here. It's hard to explain this without sounding like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. You have to understand the dynamics in the wood better to really fully understand this. First of all, that wood that I built that guitar out of had set on my upper shelf, like on this, but on the upper top shelf. So that's the hottest place in the shop. It had set in a different shop for probably 5-6 years, and it sat in this shop for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, maybe a total of 12 or 15 years total. And that wood still wasn't thoroughly dried. And so when I built the guitar out of it, because you make the wood so much thinner, it can dry much better. And even though I thought it was 100% dry, it probably wasn't, and that's probably what caused the cracks. Now, you might say, well, they had it in their dry house, and they didn't humidify it and all. Well, no, it's really got very little to do with that. It's got more to do with the drying it properly to begin with. And if it was dried properly to begin with, there's almost no way on this planet you're going to dry it out more in your house. That's me talking, and I'll take that to the bank. You can believe what you want, and you can disagree all you want. But I'm sorry to tell you, you're wrong on that one. So anyway, that's what happened to it, and it needs a little bit more work probably to buff it out, make it look a little nicer. But I didn't have a lot of time when they were in a hurry to get it because of their festival coming up, and so I just did a quick and dirty job on it, to be truthful. JJ asks, would a hardwood pick guard bonded to the top be a reasonable material? Well, it depends on what you mean by bonded. I would use two-way tape or something. I don't think I'd glue it down. But yeah, I use hardwood pick guards on all the custom instruments I build. If I'm putting a pick guard on it, it's a hardwood pick guard, yes. So yeah, it's very viable. I always do that. Rude Jansen missed my question. Would be an idea to use 3 heated rollers and make a jig like the fretboard to bend the sides? Would it be an idea to use 3 heated rollers and make a jig like the fret bender to bend the sides? I'm not quite sure I understand the fret bender part. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to bend stuff. So yeah, using heated rollers would be great. It's a lot more complicated. So if you've got the ability to do that, it'd probably work great. But that's about all I can answer on that because I don't quite fully understand it. I'm sure somebody out there understands it perfectly. I'm just, like I said, I'm not a good reader. Reading stuff doesn't transfer to my brain very well. I don't learn things by reading. I learn things much better by just seeing it. You know, my eyes seeing something, I can tell you almost everything I need to know about it in 5 minutes or less. Everyone has an opinion, and let's see, that's just Zappa talking there. Let's see, Clyde Lewis, does brush on lacquer have the same ventilation concerns as spray on? Yeah, I would say so, Clyde. Neither one of them are going to make you real happy if you're in a confined space. You're not going to want to smell them very long. They really are pretty strong. John C., we're going over time, Jerry, and you got stuff to do. You know what? We are, and I didn't realize it. Okay, let me just look real quick to see if there's any last question. There's one last question, or maybe two, and I'll get those really quick. Gary C. Volt, what would you prefer to make your necks out of? Recently built one from mahogany and can't say I like it. Mahogany is a good choice, but I like to laminate. I like to put multiple plies of wood down the middle of mine and put the mahogany on both sides. That stiffens it up a lot and keeps it from, warping, twisting, anything like that that wood can do. So I make all my necks, and I'm pretty sure I can say this 100%. I don't think I've ever made a solid wood neck on anything. I've always made a laminated neck, and I think that's the way to go. It looks like there's questions popping up really fast. Alfred Sampery, hi Jerry, is it possible that a sound post as used on violins, cellos would improve the sound of a guitar or mandolin? No, absolutely not. I can tell you for sure. Again, ask me how I know. I've done it. It's not a good thing. I've put sound posts in on mandolins where the tops were caving in, like a cheap mandolin, for instance, or a mandolin, even a handmade mandolin that just wasn't made right and the top was starting to cave in. I've put sound posts in them and they don't sound good at all. It's a different technology. The difference is that bow keeps everything vibrating. It just, as you're dragging that bow across, that eventually sends that vibration into the back, because of that sound post. That's a different technology than a plucked sound. It does not sound good on a plucked instrument. It does not. At least I haven't found one where it sounded good, and I've done it 3 or 4 times, and it's never improved the sound. It's always made it worse. Dave Burton, good morning from Colorado. On intonation, when I check it on the 12th fret by pushing the string down, I'm about 5 cents sharp. If I tap the string to get the harmonics, it's spot on. What gives? Well, I would say that's a fairly easy answer, actually. You got your string tuned open to a particular note, and when you tap it, you're still getting that same note. But when you note it, that's a different thing. You know, and a lot of people swear by that harmonic thinking that that's the way to go. But honestly, that's a fooler. It really is a fooler. That harmonic is just coming out of that open note. It's not coming out of your 12th fret, even though you're pinging it at the 12th fret. It's not the same. So the note is your true intonation. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that and argue with me on that. And again, I say you're welcome to your disagreement, your other belief. But again, I say you're wrong. So there you go. That's going to be my last word today. I hate to end on you're wrong, but I'm going to end on it.